Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Inconceivable Talkback. I'm Val. I'll be your tour guide this evening. You are here at the Trident Network, if you were unaware of where you are right now. The Trident Network is a digital entertainment network featuring three prongs. Get it? Three prongs. Of entertainment. We've got podcasts, which obviously you are familiar with if you are here. We have video content on our YouTube channel, including both sketches and web series and a number of other random things. And we also have live shows here on Twitch, like what you're watching right now. Welcome. Hello. Our goal here at Trident is to basically help people who have great ideas to turn them into reality. And so we're very excited to be here tonight with the Inconceivable crew, because that is exactly what happened here. The Inconceivable creator, Amanda, had an idea, and we got down to it and made it happen. And we're so proud and we're so happy and honored that Amanda chose us. So we're going to have a bunch of fun stuff happen tonight. And we're going to start the night right off with a scene from episode 3. Have you listened to it already? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. It's about to be a fresh take if you haven't. But either way, enjoy leaving the restaurant.
What the hell was that?
What?
You left me there to congratulate them and ask them questions when I could barely keep from crying. Did you think I actually had to go to the bathroom?
I don't know.
They invite us out, drop that bomb, and then I have to sit through an entire meal trying to hold it together. It was rude.
I'm sure they just wanted to tell us in person.
They know what we're going through. They should know better.
I'm sure they didn't even think about that.
That's exactly my point. Doesn't it bother you too?
I guess I'm just not as into it as you are.
You're not as into conceiving and creating a child together.
It's just, I just know how important this is for you.
You would make me go through IVF for a child that you don't even want.
Let's get a cab and talk at home.
Too many cab drivers know about my infertility. I'll walk. Oh, and I just got my period. So it turns out I'm just a regular person crying and housing cheese.
Wow. That was amazing. Well, welcome everyone. I think that was a great intro to this show and to the cast that's here. Let's do a round of introductions. Everyone introduce yourselves. Let's start with Amanda.
Yeah, hi, Amanda ReCupido. So I'm the creator, host, writer of Inconceivable.
Sheena, go ahead.
Okay, I'm Sheena, and I play Amy in the podcast.
Hi, my name's Ben Heber. I'm a Chicago area comedian and writer, and I am/was Mike.
Always and forever. And I'm Val. Along with being your tour guide this evening, I also directed the podcast. Yeah, and there are a number of people who are a part of the making this a reality that are not here tonight. We'll shout them out throughout the night. You'll actually hear from one of them as well later in the evening. But to get us started, we're just going to talk a little bit about everyone's experiences and kind of how this came to be. So on that note, I would love, Amanda, why don't you just tell us a little bit about sort of how this became a podcast, how this became an idea, how this became a podcast. Just tell us everything.
I will tell you everything. So, this is completely based on my experiences and the experiences of other people as I was going through this who told me about their experiences. So my husband and I tried for kids for like 4 years, passively, actively, medically, existentially, like all of it. And I would say, like, I did not set out to be like, I'm going to write a podcast about this experience. I would say, like, I'm the type of person who has to talk about what I am going through. That is how I process the world and my emotions. So I would say it started as tweets. I was just tweeting out like every little up and down, or I was texting my best friend who I know is watching. And I started then writing a little bit more formally about it. I had some humor pieces, and those are incorporated into the podcast, kind of like poking fun at, things that you'll see on fertility forums, or like the bad advice people will give you. There's a guided meditation that was like 100% almost a real meditation I had listened to. But then, some real, this is my brand. It's either humor or it's like depressing personal essays. So then there were the depressing personal essay aspects of it, because this is really hard. And so I had all these like bits and pieces of writing on this topic. And I thought, this is probably merits something more. What is that? And I sat down and wrote a web series that I believe was like 8 very quick episodes of like 1 to 2 minutes each. Some of those scenes have made it into the podcast. Some have not. Sheena actually, this was in 2020 when everything was shut down. She's been my Amy since the beginning. We did a Zoom reading just to like hear those characters come to life. And then we set it aside. It's like, what are you going to do? Would love to have filmed the web series, but the world would not allow that. So I was tinkering around. I'm like, well, what if I write a pilot episode? So like an episode of TV, if this was to be a sitcom one day, because I could enter it into contest and I could see if like anything came of it that way, which it has not. Although it is going to get a reading in the fall, which is very exciting. So then as it's like, okay, how do I actually make this happen? Because like no one's going to magically make my pilot in this moment. So looking at the scenes from that pilot, looking at some of those essays and humor pieces, and kind of like rearranging, splicing it all together into a narrative. And what you have is what you've been listening to, if you've been listening to it. And if you haven't been listening to it, please listen. So even just like hearing that scene, like that was something, even when we recorded it, I turned to Ben and Sheena being like, oh, that was like a transcript of a fight that I had out of an experience. And it's true. I told every single Lyft driver about what I was going through, because inevitably they would ask me, do you have kids? And I'd have to be like, ugh, we've got half an hour. Like, let me tell you this whole story. So again, it's like you have to find the humor in this. And I'm glad I've been able to share it. Yeah, that's where we are.
How is it? So all the episodes except the finale have come out so far. So you've had time for your pals and people on the internet to listen to it. How has the reaction been so far?
Yeah, really positive, I'd say. And I would say people who knew my husband and I were going through this, I think it's always a really sensitive topic of like, should we say anything? And like, what do we say? And what's the right thing? And what's too much? And it's very lonely. And I could not have done this. Like, we kind of stopped actively trying a couple of years ago. I could not do this if we were still in it. It's such an emotional toll. And so now that I'm removed from it, I think people are also like looking at me and looking at that experience in a different way. And I've heard from people in my life, where they're apologizing to me, and I'm like, oh, like you were very supportive. And I think again, like people just don't know how to help. And there kind of is no great way. I think just like being there for people and just saying like, I'm here to listen. I can't understand what you're going through, but I'll try. And I was even speaking to someone who is a mother where, well, I don't know what she's going through as a mother. Like I can come over and babysit, but that's not the same. And we just have to empathize with each other's experiences, knowing we're never going to fully know what it's like to be in that other person's shoes. And that's just empathy in general that we should all have for each other in life in general. But I also have heard, we do have an Instagram page at Inconceivable Pod. So a lot of other fertility accounts, but also people going through it, and others, there's obviously a humor aspect to this podcast, so other people are finding it in different ways. And just hearing like, thank you, not only for taking on this topic, but for making it funny, because a lot of the time it is not funny. A lot of the times, it is a couple like talking through their ups and downs, week to week of, injections and blood draws and like all that nitty gritty. So to kind of even just take a step back and look at the absurdity of this, I think has been a relief to some people. And even like, again, before the podcast, just sharing my story, people in our lives that we didn't even know had done some type of fertility treatment, were coming out and sharing their story with me. And again, not everyone is interested in sharing their story publicly. Everyone has a different threshold of what they're comfortable with something that is typically private. I clearly don't have that line. And I think that is a gift to speak on a typically taboo subject for people who are otherwise, maybe afraid or just, for other reasons, like don't want to share that. So if someone can kind of share that truth, like I'm happy to be the oversharer of that. Because I do think we need to talk about this more, and we are starting to talk about it more. But there's, more experiences beyond myself. So we need even more of these stories. And I think we're starting to get more of that. There's more media focusing on infertility. There's a great movie. It's called Private Life with Paul Giamatti and Catherine Hahn. It's about an older couple going through fertility. There's the Alana Glazer had like this horror story about a fertility clinic, and even like episodes of TV like Brooklyn Nine-Nine, Friends from College, like are having like fertility arcs, because it is very common. It's more common than you think. It's more common even than I thought going through it. It's like 1 in 8 couples, which is quite a lot. So you never know who's going through it around you.
Yeah. Wow. That's yeah. I mean, this is a gift to people who felt like they were alone, for sure. Sheena, what was your experience playing Amy?
I felt really honored to play Amy because I think, to Amanda's point, it's a story that needs a voice, if that makes sense. And so I was honored to like literally bring that voice to the script. Because while I haven't like personally gone through the experience, enough of my friends have gone through the heartbreak and the grieving associated with this, depending on like whether or not their IVF journeys worked or whatever it is that they were doing. And I think anything with reproductive health just isn't very openly discussed, right? And so I was really excited that there would be a story like this one where it wasn't a subplot in another story, but it was the story. This is what we are going to talk about. And so I was just really excited, and I was excited to share with my friends that I was doing this and that it might be something that brings them comfort, or again, if they're not at that place yet, maybe they'll listen to it in a few months or years, depending on how they're feeling with what their path has looked like, if that makes sense. And there's something so public about asking women about kids they may or may not have, right? It's like the Mother's Day anecdote where if I go to the store, strangers will wish me happy Mother's Day. I'm like, what? And I don't know if other women have had this experience, but that's so wild to me. I'm a childless elder millennial, and very few of my family members approach that with like an air of sympathy. They're like, you live alone. Like, whereas like the people in my inner circle are like, we love that for you. You're so free. So I don't know. I guess that's a really rambling answer to say I can kind of identify with Amy in the sense that like I'm an older woman that doesn't have kids, right? And so there's interesting interactions around that, and friendships change as a result of that. And I wanted to really honor the importance of just the story being told, because I don't think we talk about it a lot. Like, I don't know. I think it's something that someone might say like, yeah, they're having trouble or whatever. So what are we getting for dinner? Like, we don't really dive into what this looks like. So I don't know if that answered it, but that's what I'm sharing.
Yeah, that was your experience. So that's the answer. Well, Ben, I'm dying to know the male perspective on all of this.
So many people are. From what I understand on the internet, a lot of men's voices need to be heard on this topic.
Yes, they do. And can you add your male voice to the chorus?
I'd be glad to. I personally try to make a point to not do that, but since I've been explicitly asked, I guess this is now as good a time as any. My experience with this seems actually pretty similar to Mike, the character. So in that way, it was pretty easy to like relate to this role. because this is one of those things when you are a sort of cis hetero dude, you might say. I'm gonna use dude as sort of that catch-all term. Um, there are certainly things in the reproductive rights and health sort of sphere that obviously I care about, and things that I would like to see go in a certain way. But I'm sort of one step removed from them, because for me this is all theory. And for and I think that comes through in the Mike character. For Mike, it's one thing, and for Amy, it's the same topic, but it is so intensely personal, because this is her body, and these are things that are going to be happening to and through her. And it's very easy from the dude point of view to sit back and say, like, yes, I care about this, but it's not my place, it's not my fight per se. It's easy to sort of, like, for as emotionally invested as we are, to sit back and almost be like a cheerleader and take sort of a more passive role, which is wrong. And it is incumbent on guys like me and Mike to be more proactive in things like this.
I love that take. It's a lovely
Thanks.
take. Thank you for adding your male voice to the choir.
Anytime. Someone's got to hit the low notes.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna call him myself now. So I as I mentioned earlier, I directed this podcast, and I was very excited to do so for a lot of the same reasons that everyone has already said. I mean, I think, like, I am in the thick of it in terms of, like, I do not have children, but pretty much all of my friends who are my age do, or are in the process of it. And I have had friends who have experienced this exact thing that is told in this story. And I'm very honored that they felt comfortable telling me that, but I know that, like, they felt like they really didn't have a lot of people that they could talk to about it, that people don't want to hear about it because they're so sad, and, like, kind of, it was like, oh, okay, let's order dinner. Like, it's like that is the reaction, because nobody knows, like, how to deal with this. And I feel very similarly to you, Amanda, in that, like, I think comedy is the way to, like, make difficult or challenging topics more digestible, more accessible to people. I think that comedy can change people's minds more easily. I just think it's such a great tool for so many different things when it comes to getting ideas into the world and processing them too. And so, like, the opportunity to direct something like this was really exciting for me. And as far as, like, the act of directing, you all made it very, very easy for me. I didn't have to, like, do a whole lot, but I did in coming into it, because, much like the two cast members who we've just heard from, I don't have this exact experience myself, right? So I'm coming from it and as an exercise in empathy, and trying to make sure that I can try the best I can to put myself in the shoes of each of the characters and help them get there in the process. And I think it turned out so well, and that's a credit to all of you. I just stood there and was like, yeah, that was good. So well done, everyone. I think we really ended up with such a cool final product that I hope does connect with people, either if they are experiencing this, helps them maybe smile a little bit about, some of the more ridiculous elements, even as they're going through it, even though it's so hard to do that. And for people who aren't, to, be able to find a part of themselves that can relate and that can connect to this story. I just think we need to be talking about this more in general. I keep learning things that are, like, taboos around, like, for example, how nobody announces that they're pregnant until the end of the first trimester. Like, that's so stigmatizing to people who experience pregnancy loss. And, like, thinking about like those kinds of topics kind of come up when you get more into like this sphere. And I think it's really important to kind of like bring those to the surface so that we can stop stigmatizing, so that it's not so weird to talk about it at dinner or otherwise.
And a note on Val's directing. We recorded all episodes in one sitting, if you can believe it. So that was all to her smooth directing.
It was a marathon. Amazing. It was great. Sheena was there till the very, very end. Just
I was honored. And I think honestly, it kind of worked out for the best because it was scheduled that we were going to do a rehearsal and then we were going to record it another day. And Val was like, let's just see what happens. Let's start recording tonight. And then we knocked it all out on the night of the rehearsal. Bronchitis damned.
I think I can speak for all the other actors when I say that as we were leaving that first recording session and Sheena was still had a lot to do, miles to go. I was thinking, and I'm sure everyone else was thinking, glad I'm not Sheena right now.
But those are my favorite parts, the humor articles that are like turned into like the end of the episodes. I loved those ones.
Yeah.
And I'm actually really glad you guys kept the breathing and the meditation. I don't know that Mike was like, can you just give me some like meditative breathing? And I was like, and if you listen really closely, it is not very healthy meditative breathing.
And Mike, not the character Mike, but Mike, our excellent engineer, music composer, editor, just
all around great guy. Yeah.
It even sounds like there's a laugh that stayed in there when I listened closely.
It's probably me. That's so funny. Yeah. I mean, y'all crushed it. I mean, we wouldn't have been able to do that. We wouldn't have been able to get through it all in that first night if it weren't for everyone coming prepared and ready to go. Even when, you didn't know that we were going to do that. So that was great. Y'all were great.
Yeah. And I also want to shout out Catherine, who plays Shauna, because she came in at the last minute. Was it the day of or 2 days before? Because the person who was supposed to play that character had COVID.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, just all the things that had to come together.
Yeah, a lot of people just stepping up and crushing it. So I want to talk a little bit about. So obviously, fertility in general has been in the news a lot lately. And I wanted to sort of get everyone's take on like how this has kind of affected like your way of looking at this show, what you think about it in general. And yeah, we can just, Amanda, why don't you start, since I know from your social media that you have a lot of thoughts.
Oh yes. Yeah, I mean, reproductive rights are reproductive rights, and that's whether you want a child or you do not. So abortion and I was actually, while we were recording this, while we were coordinating all of this, I was also coordinating a fundraiser for abortion for the Midwest Access Project, which trains medical professionals in the gaps of obstetrics care, because gynecology is more than abortion, and med school flies over a lot of that. And I'm like, oh, isn't this funny that I'm doing both of these simultaneously? But it's not, because it's all in the same spectrum. And as we're seeing, once the Roe decision came down, is that in states where the law is like unclear if doctors are going to be jailed or not for helping women survive, is that even baseline OBGYN care is, decreasing in quality. And women are not getting quality health care. Like reproductive care is health care. And we weren't great with that to begin with. We're like second to last, if not last, in maternal deaths in like the modernized world. And that's, it's worse for women of color. Even Serena Williams, with all of her money and power, had to advocate for herself to like not go into shock during her delivery. There are people in my life who have gotten, they call it a D&C, if you have a miscarriage that will not pass on its own. And it's interesting, Val, even that you bring up social media. because people do announce their pregnancies to more people than they would typically. You know, it's like all your like high school acquaintances and like random people you forget are still on your Facebook. And then if you have a loss, you have to communicate that too. So I have seen people that I grew up with, you know, whether it's a miscarriage or whether it's, you know, they gave birth and the child did not make it out of the NICU. Devastating, heartbreaking. This happens and has happened historically. It's not like we're in this new age of, you know, medical science where this doesn't happen anymore. Like childbirth has always been deadly for women. It's, even if everything goes right, it's a traumatic experience to the body. So I know I rambled. So back to D&Cs. So if you have a miscarriage and it can't pass on its own, if it's past, you know, a certain point, if it's not just going to like bleed out like a period, you know, you need this procedure. That's an abortion. People call it D&C because they're afraid of the word abortion. So there are people in my family who have gotten abortions that would never call it abortion. And then if you've heard of ectopic pregnancy, this was a big thing with the laws because some of these states are saying no exception for ectopic pregnancy. That's when the embryo implants in your fallopian tube. It does not make it to the uterus. It is not a viable pregnancy. What happens is that fallopian tube is going to rupture and the woman's going to bleed out and die. That's like legislating death for women. And like there's a lot of, you know, reasons people want that to happen, but it's just cruel. So abortion is healthcare. That's all I can say. And where it does fall into fertility treatments, you think, well, it doesn't affect people who want kids. IVF is illegal in some states based on this ruling. People who have frozen embryos or have frozen their eggs have to move them to different states. This is absolutely affecting people who are already going through something traumatic. And again, I think I've heard stories of people in Georgia, like if you have a miscarriage, you have to like sign paperwork that like you didn't cause this yourself. So again, you're grieving. Like I was so upset, not even being pregnant. I've never been pregnant. And there was so much emotion in just nothing. I cannot imagine what people are going through, the loss of miscarriage or the loss of an infant that they gave birth to, that they labored and gave birth to. And to have these laws make it worse for women and harder for women, where other countries are giving people time off for period leave and, you know, loss leave for miscarriages. It's just, we're doing everything backwards. And I think last night's vote for Kansas to keep it in the state constitution is very hopeful. I mean, even last summer, last fall, when Texas, you know, made it illegal, like I was like, technically the door is still open over here, but like, do we close it? Because I could see it coming. And now it's, you know, national. It's like, oh, but Illinois, we're all in Illinois. Still fine in Illinois, not necessarily forever. If you're in Illinois, if you're in districts 2 and 3 of the state Supreme Court, there are 2 women on the ballot that we need to vote in so that we keep abortion legal in Illinois, and we need to keep a Democratic governor in Illinois to keep abortion legal in Illinois. So vote November 8th. I will step off my soapbox now and I will let some other people talk.
If you're wondering how Amanda knows all this just off the top of her head, she's actually just reading her last 3 days of Instagram stories.
She is. I could confirm. But yeah, I mean, I first of all, like, just was it yesterday that the Republican governor candidate in Illinois compared abortions to the Holocaust and said that abortions was worse than the Holocaust.
Yeah.
Than the Holocaust? What? Yeah. Let's not vote for that person for a number of different reasons.
His name is Darren Bailey. He deserves to be named, but not voted.
Let's not give him exposure.
Yeah. Vote for.
But it's important that his stupid sayings should be attached to his name.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're absolutely right.
Name him and shame him.
Name him and shame him. Yeah, and to sort of tack onto what you were saying, Amanda, like not only all of the things you said, but also miscarriages present the exact same way as an abortion. So like women are going to the hospital needing help because their miscarriage is not going smoothly, and they're in some cases being questioned or accused of initiating an abortion. Even though they wanted the kid, they're just experiencing a very common experience for pregnant people, which is a miscarriage. And it's just like that criminalizing. And I've heard a lot of people draw this line and like I'm not an expert, so I don't know if this is true or not, if this is like behind the motivation for this, but like they're making a lot of this felonies. And what can felons not do?
Vote.
They can't vote. This is all about voter suppression, which just makes it even more bonkers, because they're literally willing to lead to the deaths of people in order to just have fewer people who will vote for their opponents, which is just disgusting on so many levels. I also want to point out that media, I'm so glad that like we're talking about this and that we put this podcast out and like this is out in the world, because media is suppressing this. Like obviously the news is talking about this, but for example, we had a direct experience with this at Trident. So I posted about the podcast when we first premiered, and I wanted to boost the post like any normal business owner would want to do to market something that has just started and help the podcast get some more ears on it. I got flagged because there was like I put hashtags in the Instagram posts that were like infertility, fertility, whatever. I don't even think I put like abortion or anything that was like directly related to this stuff. Even so, I got flagged, and it's been almost a month. I still can't do any paid promotions on Facebook or Instagram. And they won't like let me talk to any human being about it. They won't like just give me like access back. There is no recourse. And it's just because we talked near a topic that they have a problem with. And not only that, but so obviously I haven't been using any hashtags since then, but those posts are being suppressed. Like you can tell that they are getting fewer views, fewer likes than other posts in the same day. And like, that's to me just so disgusting. Like the social media networks can do so much good, and instead they are doing damage. And there is no reason for that. And it prevents people from getting accurate information. It prevents people from finding people who can help them. I mean, there's so many really dangerous reasons why suppression like that it can like lead to so many like bad outcomes. So, I'm just very glad that we're doing this, because the more people who see it, hear about it, like listen to the podcast, the more people are getting connected in some way to this topic in general, and hopefully we'll get connected to the broader discussion as well.
Yeah. And I mean, I told you, Val, too, posting on the Instagram page at Inconceivable Pod. Same thing with the hashtags, where it would not post, and I'd have to remove the hashtags. And I would tweet like, this is suppression, but it legit is suppression. Mm-hmm. But even still, Val, aren't a lot of people finding this podcast? Aren't the numbers great?
Our numbers are really good. Like, I can say without a doubt that of all of our podcast premieres that we've ever had, this has performed the best out of any of them.
Awesome.
Out of the gate. We started above average, and we're just going up from there.
But it still could be better. So do tell your friends.
Tell your friends, because we can't tell them via social media. So please tell your friends.
But I think that's such an interesting parallel, right? The fact that there's still so much energy trying to suppress this conversation and keep this something that people don't talk about. But clearly people need and want to talk about it, right? And I don't know. There's just something all wrapped up together. So yeah, tell your friends.
Yep. Spread the word. Cool. I was curious about something for my job security's sake. Do we think that maybe there might be a season 2?
Well, there will definitely be one if I can write it. That is the goal, to write a season 2. And I would love to hear from listeners what they might like out of a season 2. I'm also going to turn it, Sheena and Ben start thinking about, or I guess you're there. Oh, wait,
I keep looking in the wrong direction. Right? Yeah.
Because I think.
Wait, Amanda, this is large semi-autobiographical. So are you trying to ask for suggestions about what you should do that you can then write about?
Oh. Oh no. Because I recognize, my story is one story. I think if we pick back up with these characters, there's got to be a time jump. We got to see Amy like doing IVF and doing the shots. And I think, with Jessica, maybe there's a lot of stories to tell, like even within parenting. You know, right now Jessica doesn't work. Does she try to explore that part to herself? How does becoming a working mom work? What if there's like a co-parenting situation? Shauna is very much set up to be this like Instagram hashtag mom life, but Instagram is very different from reality. So how might that look? Maybe there's new characters that we, introduce to tell these other stories, the threads that haven't been told yet. As we've been talking in this discussion, like there's lots of medical racism, beyond the sexism. I think there's also something, it's not funny, but it can be. One thing I experience that I've explored a little bit in the depressing side of writing is when like your body is like not your own for some time, going to all these appointments and just like, you're just splayed legs to a lot of people. They don't even look at your face. They don't really care about the human, who you are. It brings up some past trauma of other times where your body might not have been your own. So I think that's also something really interesting to explore. This will still be a funny podcast. But you'll notice when you listen to the finale tomorrow, it's the one episode that's purposely not funny. So I think that, everything's a balance, or with me, it's extremes of extremely funny or depressing, but somewhere in there's a balance. So we'll kind of see how that all shakes out for season 2.
Great. I can't wait. Speaking of, you brought up Jessica, who is the best friend, in the story. And, we actually, Amanda sat down with, Zyla, who played Jessica in the podcast because she could not be here tonight. So we actually have some footage of that discussion that we're going to play now. So enjoy this discussion between Amanda and Zyla.
Hi, Zyla. Nice to see you.
Good to see you, Amanda.
Well, I'm so excited that you got to play Jessica in this podcast, but you also have a personal connection to the content. And I was just wondering if you could share a little bit about that.
Yeah, I am playing Jessica in your amazing podcast narrative, which I hope will grow it to be even a big piece of media. I know this is a great way to tell the story and have the characters live, but I would love to see Inconceivable in so many different ways, and it really does touch on a lot of the shame and the things that are going through women's heads as they're going through this journey, and the attempts and the trials. And I really connected with that because my personal story was I went through a divorce, finalized in 2014. And one of the major reasons why we divorced is because my husband didn't want to have kids. And he decided that after we had gotten married, we had pre-Cana Catholic wedding, went through the whole, preparation. You're going to start a family, a Catholic family with kids, and found out that he doesn't want kids. And I was like, wow, this is a deal breaker. How do I not be part of this conversation? And so 2014 divorce, marriage ends. And then I got married at 36, and I was divorced at 42. So I was, here I am going through, I'm older now. What are my options to have my own biological kid? And I know there are other options. And so after, going through the healing from the divorce and then finding out I'm not going to blame it on my last marriage, I'm going to empower myself. And I know there's ways to have my own child and be a single mom. And so I went through the process of artificial insemination, did that, which is such a traumatic experience as well, because you're like, oh, I don't really know who the father is. I'm looking through basically written profiles of these men who've provided that part of the process of making a child, right? Like that sperm. And so went through that process. That wasn't working, and then was referred to a fertility doctor who brought me into her office. And one of the first interviews about the process and where I was at, and my fertility doctor is great. She even showed me, do you know my story? And I was like, what's your story? No, actually, you were just, a referral for me and recommended to me. And she showed me her 2 children and 2 pictures of 2 beautiful daughters. And she goes, I ended up adopting. And so I'm just like, and I'm bawling. I'm like, I realize that's another option, and so going through like the whole, finding out you're not pregnant process and all of that, it very much identify with that. And there's so many different definitions of what a family is. Unfortunately, mine didn't take, but I come to terms with that as well, and have been an amazing aunt, and also came to terms with the fact, like, wow, I don't know that I really want to do it by myself, even though I had that. So you have that journey, you're at that point in time, for that time. Things like, oh gosh, I can't believe you're in your 40s, your eggs look great. Like those types of comments were like, great, the whole like, oh, great, I have great eggs at this age, because if there's anything, and it was funny is because a lot of people were coming to me, like I was befriending a lot of people that were approaching their 40s that were making that decision whether or not they were going to be a mother, or, whether or not they were going to continue with their fertility. And so the struggle is real, and it's so great that you're sharing that story and allowing other people to have these types of conversations. So
yeah, I really appreciate that. And I think what's interesting about this narrative is that even if your experience is not exactly what is presented, everyone has an in. Even if they haven't struggled with fertility, like pregnancy has its own host of issues, even if everything goes correct. It's a very emotional experience. And I can't even imagine having gone through the fertility treatments without a partner, because you just need so much emotional support. Like I lost my personality for a couple of years when I was on these hormones. And I also, I was told that I ovulate beautifully, and I am still riding that high. It's a wonderful compliment to know that, things beyond your control are like just working fine. So I guess, was there one thing in the show, like one example or one thing where it like brought you back, or like that you were surprised that still affected you after all this time?
It's the whole like having your friends that are having babies. Like I remember there was a time I was at work and a coworker had brought in her beautiful new baby because she had been on maternity leave, and you think you're strong and you're like, your trigger happens, and I was like, oh hi, and then you like literally just go to the bathroom and you just bawl uncontrollably, like, I want that, how can I not have that, so yeah, it really took me back to be part of this project, so this is several years ago, and I'm like, I shelved some of those emotions, but really have empathy for people that are going through this journey now. And I would say definitely find your tribe. It requires a lot of support. I mean, sometimes that support's not from your husband or partner or whomever is that person that you go to for really tough times. So that, and yeah, just the whole monthly stabbing yourself in the stomach, and then you're like, for me it was like, how am I doing this by myself right now? Like, do I really, like, going through that decision process, like, okay, this is really what I want each and every month. And we as women, we're already like very much energized with our emotions and our hormones, and here you are like playing with your hormones and figuring that out. So yeah, it's great. And so I just support everybody who is going through this process and really empowering themselves to find out if this is something that they can do.
Yeah. And you're, of course, happy for people who are pregnant. It's just such a complex emotional landscape. And even with the shots, it's more the psychology of sticking yourself than the actual shot itself, for sure. But similarly, at least currently in this journey, leaning into my role as an aunt, and even like that's very needed in the pandemic, like seeing how even full-time moms like are losing their minds, because it's such a difficult job. So to be part of that village is equally as important. So I'm glad we both found, a different ending and just showed that ending is still a happy one, and is an option. Absolutely. So.
Oh yeah, there's definitely a lot of Jessicas out there, and I really love what I won't say what happens, but yeah, I really really love the story. It really gives it some depth and shows how complex our journeys can be as women, and we don't really know what people are going through, and just be that safe space to share and understand. Hey, this is where we are, and I know this is where you are, and we can still be best friends, and it's really wonderful.
Yeah, well, and even choosing to focus, I mean, yes, like the couples exist, but on the female friendship, because it's such a female experience, uterus haver thing. So I'm going to ask you, because I have not written a season 2 yet. What do you want in a season 2? I'm totally putting you on the spot.
I know. I don't, that's so great. I really love just digging into the characters and maybe, finding out what that support looks like. I don't know. Like, I love a happy ending, but I know sometimes it's, happy is always redefined every single time. And it's really how we end up accepting and also really leaning into different things about our lives, and it's okay. It's okay to be like, okay, well, I did try it. I never wanted to not try. I didn't want to look back and be like, well, I didn't try. I always knew that I wanted to try.
Yes. Yeah, and as women, it's like you almost like have to put in that effort and have an excuse to be like, well, it didn't happen. It's not that you can't just say I don't want them. Like there has to be like,
right.
Give it.
And I'm telling people now that I know that maybe might have a significant other, because that's like a whole different journey. First everyone was like, oh, here's the order of operations. I have to have a guy that I really like, that I'm going to marry, that I'm going to have, that whole like order of operations doesn't have to be that way. And especially, I know a friend of mine too, she froze her eggs, and she's like those people that are doing that choice. I really applaud that as well. I wish I was at that process, maybe younger. Who knows what could have turned out. But if you're at that moment where, hey, I'm still young enough to do that, and I have the means to do that, I say go for it.
Well, thank you so much for zooming in from LA after a premiere on the red carpet last night. This is the type of talent we have in this podcast. If you're not listening, please catch up.
This will be your movie when it evolves from what you're doing.
Well, thank you so much, Zyla.
Thanks, Amanda.
Wow.
That was earlier today. That's why I'm wearing the same shirt.
It's a good shirt.
Yeah.
It's a great shirt. You could have just been being Elizabeth Warren and wearing the same shirt every day with a different blazer over it.
Yeah. Continuity.
Well, we've come to the Q&A portion of tonight's event. So if you are watching this live and you would like to ask any questions, the primary way to do so would be to put them in the chat of this live stream. That would be the easiest way. But if you do not have access for some reason to the chat, Amanda has said that she's going to keep her Instagram open, the Inconceivable Pod Instagram open, the chat. So if you can't access the chat here in the live stream, go ahead and send your questions to Amanda via Instagram. Now, we actually got a few questions before this stream started from some super fans. So we'll start with those while the other questions trickle in. So the first question is, What advice or encouragement would you give Amy? Or does that give spoilers for season 2?
Yeah, no spoilers since it's not written. I don't know. Sheena, do you want to take that one?
Yeah. I mean, it's like, it's so hard when you're the person outside of the person that's grieving, right? And I think that this is like a grief journey to some extent. You're still hopeful. You still want to like have like not Jessica, like Zyla was saying, like a happy ending. My advice would be that you don't have to do it alone. And I think you touched on this earlier, but like, it's so hard to reach out for help. And maybe that's me individually as a person, but I think a lot of us have a hard time like reaching out for help about things that are really vulnerable and things that people don't often talk about. So that would be my big advice. You don't have to do it alone. Like really lean into your network of like uterus having friends that can help you with this.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of the worst pieces of advice that anyone trying for kids gets is just relax. Because it's the last thing you can possibly do. And like someone telling you like to force you to relax, like makes you the opposite. But I would also say, yeah, like I was not relaxed during that whole process. But also like it's hard not to put your life on hold. And I would also say there are things that I've done since 2016 that I would not have done if I had gotten pregnant right away when I wanted to. And a lot of those things are great. And that's not to say I wouldn't have done them with kids. It's hard to know. It's a sliding door situation. And I think fertility can be all consuming. So it's easy to say it on the other side when I'm kind of past it now. But you got to do other things. One thing that my husband and I really enjoyed doing, it's like you got to keep your mind distracted. We went on hikes a lot. And that was just like, get away from the internet, like get away from people, like reconnect with each other. Yeah. So find a new hobby. If we haven't done enough of that in quarantine.
I love that advice because I think, again, uterus having people can be kind of reduced to their reproductive elements across the board. And so remembering that you're a whole ass person outside of this as well. Like this is a piece of the whole person. Yeah. So just remembering that there's so many elements of your interests and loves that can still be enjoyed. But to your point, it is hard not to have it be all consuming.
This is also easier said than done, but I feel like people have a vision of themselves and their future as they've like designed it in their imagination. And, you know, our lives never turn out the way that we sort of envision them ever. Oh. And so it's, I feel I've thought about this a lot, you know, like what would I do in this situation? And I think that like I would do an exercise of like, okay, what is a different future that I can conceptualize for myself that doesn't include kids or like whatever, you know, the situation calls for, but like trying to picture yourself in other ways and see the positives of what that might bring, kind of to Amanda's point of like being past it and having experiences that maybe she would not have had if things had gone a different way. Neither one is bad or good. And you are not bad because the vision that you originally had is not happening. Because we can't control everything. So, you know, I can direct a podcast. I can't direct my life. So, you know, I think that would be my advice. Again, easier said than taken, but yeah, I've thought about that, and that's what I would do. Try to do.
Oh, trying to control other things when something's out of your control? No, I have no experience with that whatsoever. I'm going to turn it to Ben and see if like this is something in a hypothetical you might also agree with. Because for me, in going through that, it was like, what is going to be my legacy? Like kids are like what you leave after you. And so like, if we're giving advice, it's like, don't put the pressure on yourself. Cause then it's like, well, I'm not going to have kids and I have to like, you know, write the great American novel. Like, you know, I have to leave something. So I'd be curious from the male perspective. I feel like men want to leave a legacy. Like, does that ring true to you?
Yeah, absolutely. And like, speaking as someone who does not and really hasn't ever wanted kids, that sort of very literal patrilineal legacy is not something that I have ever aspired to. But Amanda, I'm sure you can relate to this from a writer standpoint. Is like, whenever I have gone through hard times in my life, one thing that has helped me get through it is think like, all right, this is going to make for a good script one day. Like, how can I work this into a pilot? Like, where in the season arc is this going to be? And yeah, like taking those things that are causing you great pain and using them to create something entirely new, that in this instance can be a legacy of sorts, and the impact that you have on the world around you can be helpful in terms of like maybe restructuring how you're thinking about this thing, recontextualizing, and also remembering that like this is awful right now, but life is going to continue on, and there will be things beyond this, and one day it's going to be in my past.
Oh yeah, it's the hardest when you're
Yeah.
in it, even if you know
Yes.
it's going to get better.
Yes.
Yeah, and I've also kind of reframed, like, when you have kids, I assume, not having kids, that you're putting all of your energies like into those people who live with you.
Mhm.
And so now how I am reframing is like, with writing and sharing these stories or other stories, it's like spreading that energy outward. Not that parents can't do both. Plenty of people do. But that's like how I'm framing it for myself. And I actually, through the internet, have another question for Ben, but also for the women. How can cis het men show up better in these situations?
It's tightrope. It is, because as much as we joke about it, it's true that these conversations have been dude dominated for so long, and specifically by people like me who are just not qualified to talk on this. And so it's very easy to fall into the comfortable, safe trap of saying like, I'm here to listen, I'm here to learn. And that is true to a certain extent. But you also need to be willing to sort of put your money where your mouth is. And be as active as you can be, and not only educating yourself, but being the change you want to see in the world, so to speak, proactively, doing whatever good, contributing to whatever causes you can to do have the impact you want to see, and know that there are some situations where maybe you cannot go through IVF yourself, but the person you love is going through it, and try to make their life a little easier while they do. Cook a little extra, clean a little more.
Oh, but why are we assuming that the woman is doing the cooking and cleaning?
I said more, not at all. I'm saying more often than you normally do.
That actually sparks.
Nice try though, Amanda.
Yeah. So one of our Instagram account friends is the IVF dad.
Mhm.
This is Keegan Prue, who wrote a book for men, helping their, for the purpose of that book, female partners, supporting them. Because like, you're right, you can't be the one taking the shots, but what can you do? And I was struck again, like being years removed from this, being like, oh, if I had this at the beginning of the journey, because I think I took the burden on a lot. And didn't share, Sheena, to your point, like how much of that mental load I was taking, of just like doing the Googling and the Google rabbit holing, and like just having someone else to manage. And it's funny because a lot of the book is like the last chapter is IVF. Like a lot of it is like the lead up to. So it just shows like how much of this is mental and how much is emotional and how much is like relationship managed. And I think that men can absolutely step up in supporting their partners. And also with abortion, it is your fight as much as it is women's. I'm
for sure.
All men, not just men. I want all men listening to this to be as loud as I am on Instagram.
Yeah.
But like 2 politicians and 2 people who can make change.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely like, and the last thing that dudes can do is sort of speak to other men, and sort of be the example of like, yeah, we don't have to just sort of sit back and listen, and obviously listening is good, but it is good for men to be educated and informed and active about this type of thing. Which if you think about it, is basically what I'm doing right now, speaking to the men out there. So just, fellas, do what I do and you're going to be fine.
Be like Ben.
Please don't. I'm just gonna reel that one back in immediately.
Be like that.
Went about half a sentence too far on that one.
Loved it.
Amanda, any other fun ones coming in through IG?
Not anything else. So
okay. Well, we've got a couple more that we got in advance. What was like a way that you kind of processed this or healed during or after this journey that worked for you?
Yeah, well, aside from writing, which I could not do in the thick of it, and aside from like walking a lot, which I find to be very meditative, I got really into skincare.
Oh, yeah.
Like you need to like have like your self-care moment. And yeah, so I would say like skincare, because I don't drink. That was also something that was happening simultaneously as we were doing fertility, as I was not drinking, which does help when you're going through that, but it was also for like several other reasons too. So it's like I needed like something that was going to replace like a cocktail. So it was all the goop that you put on your face and then like you look great. But yeah, and I think like, walking's great, but also I got really into yoga. I mean, I always had that, but like more into yoga and like the more restorative yoga. So the less active and the more just like letting yourself be and breathe and like melt into the floor kind of yoga. Cause again, I need to pay someone to tell me to relax. Go figure. And again, I think anything where you can connect with your body, where both of those things are pampering your body during a time where you're really asking your body to do a lot and you're really taxing your body. My body went through a lot. So I think, yeah, any way you can take care of yourself.
Yeah. Okay. Another one. How did it feel? I mean, we've sort of touched on this a little bit, but how does it feel having this story out in the world or even writing it? But like definitely with people like knowing very explicitly that this is your experience.
Yeah. And I mean, like, I don't care that people know it's me. I say that at the beginning of every episode, like, oh, it's not me. I do find it interesting because I had written about it so much before, and not that it's like, oh, these people clearly weren't reading those other things. But I think it's just presented in a way that when you have actors voicing it, when there's emotion and you're just not reading something on a page, it hits differently. So I think there's like a very visceral reaction to this in a good way. And I think because, again, since 2016, just fertility discussions have progressed, but also, again, reproductive health conversations. Like, my God, it's something I've been, talking about since like, the mid-aughts. And that was such a fringe conversation. And now it's everywhere. So to watch that go mainstream, people who are not political, on create mode and on Instagram, it's like people who are not usually politicized or politicized. So I think this is hitting at a particular moment where we need it too.
Nice. I want to ask you about sort of like making this funny. I guess first off, when were you able to even look at it at all as like humorous? And then what was the process like of sort of like being like, oh yeah, okay, this is funny, or this can be funny, versus was there anything also that was like, I just cannot make this funny no matter how hard I try?
Yeah, I mean, I guess my coping mechanism is like, even in the moment, to find the humor. Because I mean, some of the things that like made it into the podcast, like, seeing a woman in the fertility clinic and she already has a kid with her, like bitch about her on your group chat. Like I did that like that day. Like there are some things where it's almost absurd that you need to call it out. And it's a way of dealing with your pain. So this is not in the show. I think I wrote about it somewhere. I can't remember. But like there was one time I had a panic attack with like during an IUI. like with an ultrasound wand, like inside my body. That was not funny in the moment. But after I was like, okay, it's like, oh, that's hilarious. Like, who does that? Me. Yeah. So like, again, there's a lot of emotional and like mental health stuff with this. And like, you almost like have to find the humor. Otherwise, like you will cry all the time. And I did. But you have to find the moments of levity, and also laugh at yourself.
Nice.
And then if you listen to, I think it's episode 2, Significant Bowel. Okay. Come on.
Good.
That happened and I was mortified in the moment, but then it's like, okay, I got the piece of shit line in my head and it's like, all right, if it's content.
Sheena and Ben, was there any particular part of the story that you connected particularly to, or that like tickled you in a special way? Sorry, I didn't mean to make that sound weird.
No, I get it. I think, again, I love the my favorite article that was reworked for an episode is the acronyms of the like message boards. What's the right word for that? Like the community spaces.
Yeah, it's like fertility forums.
Yeah, fertility forums. That's my favorite part. Like I learned so much through that, and there's like such good humor there. And then the fight scene that we read at the top of this felt so real when you feel like your partner's not there for you. Like when you realize there's a disconnect. That scene, I think, really stuck out and struck me in a way that was really well written and just like powerful to perform. Like, you know, for how we did it, we had the script in front of us, we're reading it, but like the emotions couldn't help but come up because I'll speak for myself. It's really hard to be let down by the person you've invested so much time and energy in, right? Like, so those two scenes stand out to me the most.
And Sheena knows my husband, so it's like, okay.
I know. And he's such a chill dude.
Yeah. The acronyms. I think one of my favorite is BMS, baby making sex. It's like, why do you need that?
Like,
that's what I'm saying. Like, there's so much, again, it's absurd. I have to poke fun at it.
Ben, what about you?
Yeah, I've definitely talked about, the ways in which I've related to Mike in this. But I think the one that has stood out to me the most upon first reading was this feeling, this almost conflict of wanting to be supportive and helpful and wanting to do something and knowing that fundamentally I cannot. Knowing that like I cannot reach inside you and plug sperm into egg and make a baby happen.
Yeah.
And like just almost a feeling of helplessness that like I am invested in this situation. I want to help as much as I can. And I cannot do much more other than, pat you on the back, encourage you with my words. And that's like as much as I can do. And it just feels so useless, especially in the moment when you're facing this person who is going through an incredible struggle and you're like, best I can do is a shoulder rub right now. It's a tough spot to be in.
Yeah. I honestly, what sold me on this was the first scene. I love that first scene because there's something really like when you're in a partnership with someone where you just have that kind of rapport where you can talk about growth. Like there's no difference between like, what are we having for dinner? And look at this weird thing that just came out of my body. Like, I love that. Like, and being able to achieve that in writing and in performance is really special. Because I think that's like anyone can kind of connect to that or at least want that if they've never experienced it themselves. And when I read that, I was like, yep, this is going to be good.
Not everyone can put cervical mucus on page 1.
But you can.
Well, actually,
literally.
when I wrote the pilot version, that was some of the feedback was that went too far. And I'm like, honestly, if someone's not on board with that, I don't want it.
No.
Like, I don't want to
then they're not ready for the rest of the story.
Right.
Yeah.
What we call a hook.
I should also shout out Zach Kennard had run this program out of IO pre-pandemic called Does Your Script Have Legs? Or it was Cold Read
Hot
Hot
Scripts.
Scripts.
He
Yeah.
did both. it was one of those. Yeah, and it was like December, right before the pandemic. And we did a reading of the web series, and that was the feedback of like, oh yeah, cervical mucus, like we're in. Like it tells you exactly what this is going to be. Yeah. So if you haven't listened, episode 1, scene 1.
To go back to that relationship though, it's so nice though, because it's Mike and Amy against the problem, right? Which is nice. They're in it together, and it shows that there's a strong foundation there, even if there are small cracks that show up later. Like, it's the two of them against the problem.
And even directing that scene, Val, where it's like, if you're married, you're always yelling from a different room. So even like leaning away from the mic.
That was my move. I leaned back.
That's the info we need, you know?
Yeah, we had a lot of discussions about like what would the logistics of this conversation be. They're definitely standing over the toilet together having that conversation. Well, I haven't seen any other questions come in. So, does anyone? Do we want to give like last thoughts? Does anyone have anything else they want to talk about?
Is this plugs or is it just chatting?
Well, it can be either. We can just do plugs. Let's just do plugs now.
Let's do plugs. Well, I mean, I will plug to vote and give to abortion funds. How about that? Then all the promo stuff. So I think I've said at Inconceivable Pod. I'm at Amanda ReCupido. I will also speak. So the actors here on this Twitch event were also in another project of mine earlier this summer that was a parody of Sex in the City called Sex in the Windy City. And I'm not saying that there's another life for it, but I would just say also maybe follow at SATW_chai and watch that space and see if there's an announcement soon. I don't know.
I'm trying to put all of these in the chat, so keep saying all the handles as you go along. Sheena, go ahead.
Send it to you too.
Closing thoughts. Obviously, listen to Inconceivable Podcast. Like, make sure to tune in for the finale tomorrow. There's some twists and turns coming your way. Duh. And then as far as like other stuff I'm working on, there's usually something at The Annoyance that you can see that I'm working on right now. There's a show that I choreographed called When You Wish Upon a Star. It's about the exploitation of Disney employees. So you can go and check that out on Thursday nights at The Annoyance. And, you know, maybe some other projects we can talk more about soon.
Ben, what you got going on?
So Saturday nights at 10 p.m. you can see Riff, Chicago's music improv party at the Annoyance Theater. It's a rotating cast, so sometimes I'm in it, sometimes I'm not, but it's always a great time. I think my next show is August 20th. You can find that. I have a lot of stuff going on, a web series I'm writing for that will hopefully be up soon. Some cool new show about Sex in the City that may or may not be happening. So to stay in touch with all that and more, you can find me on Instagram and Twitter at benebear.com. That's at BENHEBERTDOTCOM, an unwieldy handle for a guy with a confusing last name. There was no good way to do that. That's what I've got going on in my life. Val, back to you.
Thanks, Ben. Let's see. Well, I've got this podcast. I've also got another podcast on the Trident Network called Decommentaries, where my friend Al and I talk about Disney Channel original movies of years past. We have a blast. It's fun. Listen in. Also, just in general, Trident is my baby, and we have a lot of amazing stuff on here that is made by a lot of really incredible people. I can't recommend them all highly enough. And I perform with Comedy Sports Chicago, so if you're ever around Piper's Alley, Second City, and want to check out some family-friendly comedy, I am there a decent amount. It's kind of like Riff, where I'm not in every show, but I'm there. And also I want to say, if anyone is listening and is, someone who has an idea or is a content creator or a performer or whatever, and wants to learn more about how they might be able to get involved at Trident, we're always open, for new ideas, new great folks who want to get involved. So if that's you, hit us up. We're at thetridentnetwork.com, and you can find ways to connect with us there. Okay. Any last words before we say our goodbyes?
Good job, Kansas.
Yeah. Let's go, Kansas.
Yeah.
And just thanks to everyone who listened. I think we just all need to listen to each other a little bit more. And we'll be a kinder nation.
That's right. Speaking of listening, listen to the final episode of Inconceivable, dropping at midnight.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for being here, and thank you everyone for being out there and watching and taking part in this. We appreciate all of you. This will go up as a recording on our YouTube, so if you want to share it with anyone, it will be there in the next couple days. Keep an eye out. All right. Have a good night, everyone.